What if the US tariffs on China actually made China stronger? Back in 2018, Washington, D.C. launched an all out economic offensive. Tariffs were supposed to punish Beijing, cripple its exports, and bring manufacturing back to the US. But today, China is not only still standing, but it may have actually flipped the entire game. While the US was busy raising prices, China was rerouting supply chains, deepening alliances, and investing in long-term leverage. Let's unpack how China outmaneuvered the tariff wars and why the global balance of power may never be the same. So it started like this. In 2018, the US hit China with a wave of tariffs. Over $300 billion worth of goods were taxed. The goal, well, to slow down China's rise. DC accused Beijing of intellectual property theft, unfair subsidies, and trade manipulation. Tariffs were the weapon of choice, like toll booths slapped on Chinese goods as they entered the US. The strategy was simple on paper: make Chinese imports more expensive, push American companies to move manufacturing elsewhere, and force China back to the negotiating table. But here's the thing: tariffs are a double-edged sword. They raised costs for US businesses, they disrupted global supply chains, and instead of folding, China actually adapted. Now, here's the twist: China didn't just sit back and absorb this damage, it actually pivoted very fast. Rather than relying on US buyers, China began rerouting supply chains through Southeast Asia. Chinese companies invested in Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia, turning them into proxy hubs. Products were partially made in China, then finished elsewhere to dodge tariffs. It was legal, clever, and effective. In 2023, Vietnam became one of the fastest growing exporters to the US. But dig a little deeper, and many of those exports had Chinese fingerprints all over them. China also ramped up efforts to make things at home, especially in key tech sectors. The Made in China 2025 initiative, once controversial, suddenly looked like survival. Billions were poured into semiconductors, electric vehicles, and green energy. The message was clear: we don't want to depend on the West anymore. And it paid off. By 2024, China was the world's top producer of solar panels, EV batteries, and rare earth metals, crucial components in everything from smartphones to missiles. Then came the geopolitical shift. China deepened ties with the BRICS bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and helped expand it to include countries like Iran, Egypt, and the UAE. Together, they launched trade deals using local currencies instead of the US dollar, a move aimed directly at weakening American financial dominance. By 2025, over a dozen countries were experimenting with de-dollarized trade, bypassing SWIFT, US banks, and the reach of US sanctions. It was economic chess, and while Washington was still arguing about tariff lists, China was rewriting the rules. So where does this leave us? Well, the US got some wins. Companies did move factories out of China, but many just shifted to other low-cost countries, often still backed by Chinese capital. Tariffs didn't stop China, they redirected it. Today, the world is splitting into economic spheres, one led by the US and its allies, the other coming together around China, BRICS, and alternative systems. For global trade, that means more destruction, more currency battles, and less predictability. For the US, it should be a wake-up call. Tariffs alone can't contain a nation that's planning 10, 20, or even 50 years ahead. And for investors, it's a signal to watch the geopolitical map as closely as a stock ticker. And if you think the US is done playing defense or offense, think again. DC is already preparing new tariffs, new alliances, and new tech restrictions. The next economic war won't be fought with ships or soldiers, but with chips, currencies, and supply chains. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, please leave a like, subscribe, and maybe stay ahead of the curve here on Investors Digest.